The Montgomery Fire Department had never seen anything like it. Two naked people stuck together like human Velcro, screaming for help while firefighters tried to figure out how to separate them without causing permanent damage. But here's the thing that will blow your mind. This wasn't some freak accident or bizarre medical condition. This was revenge served cold, calculated, and absolutely delicious. Standing calmly on the front porch of her Oak Street home, 68-year-old Marlena Williams sipped her sweet tea like she was watching a Sunday afternoon baseball game, not a full-blown emergency response unfolding in her driveway. The Alabama heat was brutal, 98 degrees with humidity thick enough to cut with a knife, but Marlena's composure never wavered. Her silver-gray hair was perfectly coiffed, her floral house dress pressed and pristine, and her eyes held the kind of satisfaction that comes from watching karma finally catch up with someone who deserved it. Behind her, Keisha Williams Thompson, her 42-year-old daughter, was having a complete breakdown. The registered nurse who had spent her career saving lives was now sobbing uncontrollably, her hands shaking as she tried to process what was happening in her own bedroom. "Mama, what did you do?" Keisha kept repeating, her voice barely above a whisper. "What did you do?" The scene was surreal. Neighbors from up and down Oak Street had gathered in their yards, drawn by the flashing lights and the sound of emergency vehicles. Some were filming on their phones, others were just staring in disbelief. The Montgomery Fire Department's Engine 7 had arrived first, followed by 2 ambulances and a police cruiser. The firefighters were clearly baffled. They had responded to everything from house fires to cat-and-tree rescues, but this was something entirely new. Captain Rodriguez, a 20-year veteran of the Montgomery Fire Department, approached Marlena with a clipboard and a look of pure bewilderment. "Ma'am, I need to understand what happened here. Can you tell me how these two people got stuck together?" Marlena took another sip of her sweet tea, her eyes never leaving the chaos unfolding in her driveway. "Well, Captain," she said, her voice as smooth as honey, "that's a long story. But I can tell you this much. Sometimes when people make bad choices, the universe has a way of making sure they face the consequences." The mystery woman was screaming obscenities that would make a sailor blush. She was trying to cover herself with a sheet that the paramedics had provided, but every time she moved, she and Darius would both cry out in pain. Darius himself was alternating between begging for help and threatening legal action, his face red with embarrassment and rage. Marlena's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it, smiled, and put it back in her pocket. The text was from Sister Rosetta Johnson, her 71-year-old best friend, and the church secretary at Greater Mount Zion Baptist Church. It read, "Evidence secured. The real fireworks are about to begin. Tyrone Ty Williams, Marlena's 45-year-old son, and a Montgomery police detective, arrived just as the firefighters were finally making progress with the separation." He took one look at the scene and immediately understood what had happened. "Mama," he said, approaching her on the porch, "what did you do?" Marlena turned to her son, her eyes filled with a mixture of satisfaction and something else, something that looked almost like regret. "I did what any mother would do, Ty. I protected my family." The firefighters finally managed to separate Darius and his mystery woman, but not without some creative problem solving. They had to use a combination of medical-grade solvent, careful cutting, and a lot of patience. Both Darius and the woman were now wrapped in blankets, their faces flushed with embarrassment and pain. As the paramedics loaded Darius and his companion into separate ambulances for medical evaluation, Marlena finally put down her sweet tea and turned to face her family. "Now," she said, her voice carrying the authority of a woman who had spent 35 years as a school principal, "let's talk about what really happened here." As the emergency vehicles pulled away from Oak Street, leaving behind only the flashing lights of the police cruiser, Marlena turned to her daughter and son. "Keisha, Ty," she said, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had just changed everything, "there's something I need to tell you about Darius. Something that will make you understand why I had to do what I did." As Marlena pulled a small recording device from her pocket and pressed play, the Williams family was about to discover that Darius Thompson wasn't just a cheating husband. He was a predator who had been recording their most intimate conversations for months, planning to use them as blackmail material to secure a position in the family business, a position that didn't even exist. But the real shock was yet to come. Because what Marlena was about to reveal would prove that Darius wasn't just planning to destroy their family. He was planning to profit from it. 6 months ago, Darius Thompson had been the answer to every mother's prayer, successful, charming, and head over heels in love with her daughter. But here's the thing that will blow your mind. Marlena Williams had known from day one that something wasn't right. Her maternal instincts, honed from 35 years of reading people's true intentions, had been screaming at her like a fire alarm in the middle of the night. The memory was crystal clear in Marlena's mind as she stood on that porch, watching the chaos unfold. It had been a warm Sunday afternoon in late January, the kind of day when Montgomery's oak trees were just beginning to show signs of spring. The Williams family had gathered at Marlena's house on Oak Street for their weekly Sunday dinner, a tradition that had been unbroken for over 20 years. The smell of fried chicken and collard greens wafted through the house. The sound of laughter and conversation filled every room. The warm afternoon sun streamed through the windows. The family gathered around the dining room table, generations of love and tradition. Darius had arrived exactly on time, which Marlena noted as the first red flag. In her experience, people who were always perfectly punctual were usually compensating for something. He had been dressed in a navy blue suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, his shoes polished to a mirror shine, and his smile so bright it could have powered a small city. "Mrs. Williams," Darius had said, extending his hand with a kind of confidence that made Marlena's skin crawl, "it's such an honor to finally meet you. Keisha has told me so much about you." Marlena had taken his hand, and the moment their skin touched, she'd felt it, a coldness that had nothing to do with temperature. It was like shaking hands with a snake that had learned to smile. But she'd smiled back, because that's what you do when your daughter brings home the man she's convinced is her soulmate. The feel of Darius's hand was smooth, almost slippery, like it had been coated in something. His voice was too smooth, too practiced, like he'd rehearsed every word. His eyes were dark and calculating, never quite meeting hers directly. His cologne was expensive but overwhelming, like he was trying to mask something. The dinner had been a masterclass in performance. Darius had charmed everyone at the table, Tyrone with stories about his police work, which Marlena later discovered was completely fabricated, Sister Rosetta with tales of his charitable work, which turned out to be non-existent, and Keisha with promises of a future filled with love and security. But it was the small details that had set off Marlena's alarm bells. The way Darius's eyes had flickered when Tyrone mentioned his work as a detective. The way he'd hesitated just a fraction of a second before answering questions about his education. The way he'd changed the subject whenever anyone asked about his family. The evening had ended with everyone except Marlena completely charmed by Darius. Keisha had been glowing with happiness, Tyrone had been impressed by his professional demeanor, and even Sister Rosetta had been won over by his spiritual insights. But Marlena had gone to bed that night with a feeling of dread that she couldn't shake. The sound of the house settled into silence after everyone had left. The cool sheets pressed against her skin as she lay awake. Moonlight streamed through her bedroom window. The magnolia blossoms outside carried a sweet scent that somehow felt ominous in the darkness. As Marlena lay in bed that night, listening to the sounds of her sleeping house, she had no idea that Darius was already putting his plan into motion. He was sitting in his car outside her house, making phone calls to people whose names would later make her blood run cold. He was setting up bank accounts, creating false identities, and building a web of deception that would take months to unravel. The sound of Darius's voice carried through the darkness, speaking in hushed tones to someone on the other end of the phone. The cold night air surrounded him as he sat in his car, watching the Williams house. The lights in the windows glowed, each one representing a family member he was planning to destroy. The smell of the cigarette he was smoking curled into the night sky. As Darius drove away from Oak Street that night, he had no idea that Marlena Williams was already planning her own countermove. She wasn't just going to wait for him to destroy her family. She was going to strike first, and when she did, It would be with the precision of a surgeon and the fury of a mother protecting her children. But the real shock was yet to come. Because what Marlena was about to discover would prove that Darius wasn't just planning to destroy their family. He was planning to profit from it. February in Philadelphia brought relentless sleet that tapped against the windows of Derek's apartment like impatient fingers. 2 weeks had passed since Gloria's eviction, and the small one-bedroom had transformed from a detective's crash pad into something resembling a war room. Maps of Westchester County covered one wall. Photos of Marcus with Mayor Thompson and various Boston businessmen lined another. Red string connected properties, shell companies, and bank accounts, forming a web of corruption that Derek could barely untangle. Gloria sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the chaos with wide eyes. "You really think Darius is tied up in all of this?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and disbelief. Derek nodded grimly. "Not just tied up. He's orchestrating it." And Marlena's little stunt back in Montgomery just blew the lid off his whole operation. Now he's desperate. That makes him dangerous. The radiator hissed in the corner, doing little to warm the drafty apartment. The smell of burnt coffee lingered in the air. Derek rubbed his temples, exhaustion written all over his face. He's laundering money through construction contracts, funneling kickbacks through the mayor's office, and using shell companies to hide the trail. And if we don't stop him, he's going to own half of Westchester within a year. Gloria pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "But why target your family? Why the Williams?" "Because we're the one thing he can't buy," Derek said, his jaw tightening. "Family loyalty, trust, reputation. He can manipulate businesses and politicians, but he can't fake what we have. And that makes us a threat." The storm outside intensified, sleet pounding the windows like bullets. Gloria looked at Derek, fear in her eyes. "So, what do we do?" "We fight," Derek said simply. "We gather evidence, we expose him, and we make sure he never hurts another family again." He looked at the board on the wall, the red strings crisscrossing like veins in a body, each one leading back to Darius Thompson. "This isn't just about revenge anymore," he said quietly. "It's about survival." The following week, Montgomery was buzzing with whispers. The glue incident had become the talk of the town, spreading faster than wildfire at a church potluck. Marlena could hardly step into the Piggly Wiggly without someone giving her a knowing look. She didn't mind. In fact, she relished it. Let them talk. Let them wonder. Every whisper was a reminder that Darius's carefully constructed mask was starting to crack. Keisha, on the other hand, was struggling. Her co-workers at the hospital tried to comfort her, but she couldn't shake the humiliation. "Mama," she said one evening, her voice thick with exhaustion, "you didn't have to do it that way. Now, everybody knows our business." Marlena looked at her daughter with steady eyes. "Baby, sometimes you have to burn the house down to smoke out the rats." Ty, who had been listening quietly, leaned forward. "Mama's right. Darius isn't just some cheating fool. He's dangerous. He's been making moves that don't add up." "What kind of moves?" Keisha asked. Ty exchanged a glance with Marlena before answering. "Shady money transfers. Calls to numbers that trace back to Boston. He's involved with people who don't forgive debts lightly." Keisha shook her head, tears brimming. "I just wanted a happy marriage. A good father for my kids." Marlena took her hand. "And you deserve that. But this man is no good, Keisha. He'll destroy everything if we let him." That night, Marlena couldn't sleep. She sat on the porch, rocking slowly in her chair, listening to the hum of cicadas. She thought of her late husband, Robert, and how proud he would be that she was protecting their family. She thought of her grandchildren, sleeping soundly inside, blissfully unaware of the storm gathering around them. She whispered into the night, "Lord, give me strength, because this fight is just beginning." Darius sat alone in a cheap motel room on the outskirts of Montgomery, his pride as battered as the peeling wallpaper around him. The mystery woman, whose name was Jasmine, had left him hours ago after a shouting match that ended with her slamming the door and swearing never to see him again. He lit a cigarette, the smoke curling toward the water-stained ceiling. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his messages. Dozens of missed calls. Bank alerts. A text from a Boston number that made his blood run cold. "You're sloppy. Clean it up. We're watching." He smashed the phone against the nightstand, cursing under his breath. Marlena had embarrassed him in front of the entire neighborhood, and now his associates were questioning his competence. He couldn't afford weakness. Not now. He opened his laptop and logged into an encrypted account. On the screen, rows of offshore accounts and shell companies glowed like treasure chests. Millions moved through them, each dollar tied to a scheme bigger than anyone in Montgomery could imagine. But Marlena had to interfere. That old woman with her sweet tea and sharp instincts had undone years of careful planning with one act of vengeance. He clenched his fists, hatred simmering in his chest. "This isn't over, Marlena," he muttered. "You think you won? You have no idea who you're dealing with." He reached into his duffel bag and pulled out a folder thick with documents. Inside were deeds, forged contracts, and blackmail material. Photos of the Williams family. Notes on their routines. He had been preparing for this war long before Marlena poured glue where lube should have been. And now, he told himself, the gloves were coming off. February in Philadelphia brought relentless sleet that tapped against the windows of Derek's apartment like impatient fingers. 2 weeks had passed since Gloria's eviction, and the small one-bedroom had transformed from a detective's crash pad into something resembling a war room. Maps of Westchester County covered one wall. Photos of Marcus with Mayor Thompson and various Boston businessmen lined another. Red string connected properties, shell companies, and bank accounts, forming a web of corruption that Derek could barely untangle. Gloria sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the chaos with wide eyes. "You really think Darius is tied up in all of this?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and disbelief. Derek nodded grimly. "Not just tied up. He's orchestrating it." And Marlena's little stunt back in Montgomery just blew the lid off his whole operation. Now he's desperate. That makes him dangerous. The radiator hissed in the corner, doing little to warm the drafty apartment. The smell of burnt coffee lingered in the air. Derek rubbed his temples, exhaustion written all over his face. He's laundering money through construction contracts, funneling kickbacks through the mayor's office, and using shell companies to hide the trail. And if we don't stop him, he's going to own half of Westchester within a year. Gloria pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "But why target your family? Why the Williams?" "Because we're the one thing he can't buy," Derek said, his jaw tightening. "Family loyalty, trust, reputation. He can manipulate businesses and politicians, but he can't fake what we have. And that makes us a threat." The storm outside intensified, sleet pounding the windows like bullets. Gloria looked at Derek, fear in her eyes. "So, what do we do?" "We fight," Derek said simply. "We gather evidence, we expose him, and we make sure he never hurts another family again." He looked at the board on the wall, the red strings crisscrossing like veins in a body, each one leading back to Darius Thompson. "This isn't just about revenge anymore," he said quietly. "It's about survival." Back in Montgomery, the Williams household was tense. Keisha had stopped going to church, embarrassed by the gossip swirling around her. The whispers followed her everywhere, at the grocery store, at work, even when she picked up her children from school. People smiled politely to her face, but she could feel the judgment in their eyes. Marlena, however, remained unshaken. She had lived long enough to know that people would talk no matter what. What mattered was protecting her family. She spent her evenings on the porch, rocking slowly in her chair, keeping a watchful eye on the neighborhood like a sentry. Ty had started digging deeper into Darius's background. Using his police connections, he pulled records, financial reports, and travel histories. The deeper he dug, the stranger things became. Darius's paper trail didn't make sense. Multiple social security numbers. Properties registered under different names. Accounts opened and closed without reason. One night, Ty sat across from Marlena at the kitchen table, papers spread out between them. "Mama," he said quietly, "I don't think Darius is who he says he is." Marlena's face hardened. I've known that from the beginning. What have you found? Ty pointed to a document. This isn't Darius Thompson. His real name is Darius Cole. And Cole has a record.
Fraud.
Identity theft. And Ty hesitated, looking at his mother. Ties to organized crime in Boston. Marlena closed her eyes, whispering a prayer under her breath. She had feared Darius was dangerous, but this confirmed it. He wasn't just a liar. He was a predator. When she opened her eyes, her gaze was steady. Then we do what we've always done, son. We protect our own, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, Darius sat in a rented black SUV outside the Williams home, watching the lights flicker inside. His face was shadowed, his expression unreadable. He had a notebook in his lap, filled with notes about the family's routines. When they came and went, where they worked, who they spoke to. Every detail mattered. He rolled down the window, lighting another cigarette, and let the smoke curl into the night. His hands trembled slightly as he flipped through the notebook. He wasn't just plotting revenge. He was calculating destruction. The sound of children's laughter carried through the cool evening air. Darius narrowed his eyes, watching Keisha's kids chase each other in the yard. For a moment, something almost human flickered in his expression. Regret, maybe, or doubt. But then it hardened. They'll thank me one day, he muttered to himself, when they understand what real power looks like. His phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. A Boston number. He answered. Cole, a voice said. Cold. Flat. You're slipping. Montgomery is laughing at you. That woman humiliated you. I'll handle it, Darius snapped. You'd better. Because if you don't, we will. And you won't like our methods. The line went dead. Darius crushed the cigarette between his fingers, the ember burning his skin. He didn't flinch. His anger burned hotter. Inside the house, Marlena paused mid-sentence, her instincts prickling. She looked out the window, scanning the darkness. She couldn't see him, but she felt him. Watching. Waiting. She whispered to herself, the devil always shows his face when you least expect it. Ty's investigation led him to Boston. He drove through icy streets lined with brownstones, the city buzzing with the energy of commerce and corruption. He had arranged to meet with a contact, an old friend from his academy days who now worked federal cases. They sat in a dimly lit diner, steam rising from mugs of coffee. Ty slid a folder across the table. I need everything you've got on Darius Cole. His friend flipped through the papers, frowning. You've got yourself a real piece of work here. Multiple aliases. International bank transfers. Shell corporations in the Caribbean. And here's the kicker, he's been linked to the O'Malley syndicate. Ty leaned back, his jaw tight. So, he's mobbed up. Worse, his friend said. He's ambitious. He isn't just working for them. He's carving out his own empire. The O'Malleys are worried he's getting too big for his britches. Ty exhaled, frustration and fear mixing in his chest. My mama was right. He's been targeting us from day one. His friend lowered his voice. Be careful, Ty. Men like Cole don't just ruin reputations. They bury people. Ty looked out the window at the snow falling softly onto the streets of Boston. His reflection stared back at him, weary but determined. I don't scare easy, he said quietly. But he's not going to touch my family. He stood, leaving cash on the table. As he walked into the cold night, he pulled his coat tighter and thought of Marlena's words. Protect our own, no matter the cost. The wind bit at his face, sharp and merciless, but Ty's resolve only hardened. The war with Darius Cole had already begun, and Ty Williams wasn't about to lose. Back in Montgomery, Keisha was unraveling. The weight of betrayal, humiliation, and fear pressed down on her shoulders. She went through the motions at work, but at night she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how her life had collapsed so quickly. One evening, she sat at the kitchen table with Marlena. The only light came from the lamp above, casting shadows across the worn wood. Keisha's hands trembled as she held her mug of tea. Mama, she whispered, what if I can't do this? What if I can't survive him? Marlena reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. Her grip was firm, steady, like an anchor in a storm. Baby, you're stronger than you know. That man might think he's powerful, but he has nothing compared to the love of a family. He can't take that away unless you let him. Tears streamed down Keisha's cheeks. I don't feel strong. Marlena's eyes softened, but her voice stayed sharp. Strength isn't about how you feel. It's about what you do when the storm comes. And baby, the storm is here. But we'll weather it. Together. For the first time in weeks, Keisha felt a spark of hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Darius flew to Boston under the cover of night. He moved through Logan Airport like a man on a mission, his expression cold, his steps precise. He knew the O'Malleys were watching him, and he had no room for error. At a private club tucked away in the North End, he met with Sean O'Malley himself. The man was broad-shouldered, with a face like carved stone and eyes that missed nothing. You've been sloppy, O'Malley said, his Irish lilt cutting through the smoke-filled room. The Williams woman made a fool of you. And now the feds are sniffing around. That's not good for business. Darius didn't flinch. I'll handle it. The Williams family won't be a problem much longer. O'Malley leaned forward, steepling his fingers. See that they aren't. Because if you drag my name into your Alabama mess, you'll wish the fire department had left you glued to that woman forever. The men around the table laughed, but there was no humor in it. Darius forced a smile, but inside his anger blazed. He would not be mocked. Not by Marlena, not by Keisha, and certainly not by the O'Malleys. When he left the club, the cold Boston air hit his face like a slap. He lit a cigarette, his hands steady now. He had a plan, and when it was done, the Williams family would regret ever crossing him. Ty returned from Boston with a heavy heart and a stack of files. He spread them across Marlena's kitchen table, the same table where generations of the Williams family had shared meals and laughter. Now it was a battlefield. These are bank records, property deeds, shell corporations. Darius isn't just a cheater or a liar. He's building a criminal empire, and he's using our family name as a shield. Keisha's eyes widened as she scanned the documents.
How?
How could he do all this without us knowing? Because he's smart, Ty said grimly. Smart and ruthless. But he made one mistake. He underestimated you, Mama. Marlena looked at the papers, her jaw tightening. He thought we were weak. He thought we'd crumble. But he forgot who raised this family. Her voice grew fierce, filled with conviction. We've survived worse than him, and we'll survive this too. He wants a war? Then a war is what he'll get. Ty nodded, his eyes burning with determination. Then we fight. We gather every piece of evidence, every lie, every stolen dollar, and we bring him down. Keisha wiped her tears, her shoulders squaring for the first time in weeks. If he thinks he can destroy us, he's about to find out what it means to take on a Williams. The three of them sat together, bound not just by blood, but by purpose. Outside, the night was quiet, but inside that kitchen, a fire had been lit. And it would not go out until Darius Cole was Sunday finished. Dinner at Marlena's house felt different now. The table was still set with fried chicken, collard greens, and cornbread, but the air was heavy with tension. Every laugh was forced, every smile strained. Even the children, usually carefree, seemed to sense that something was wrong. Marlena watched her family closely as they ate. Keisha kept glancing at her phone, waiting for messages that never came. Ty was quiet, his detective's mind clearly elsewhere. The grandchildren whispered among themselves, their voices low, their eyes darting toward the adults. Finally, Marlena set down her fork. We can't keep living like this, she said firmly. We can't let him steal our peace. Keisha's voice trembled. But Mama, what if he comes back? What if he tries something worse? Marlena's eyes sharpened. Then we'll be ready. Fear is what he feeds on. But faith and family, that's what we've got. And that's stronger than anything he can throw at us. Ty nodded slowly. She's right. But faith alone won't stop him. We need to hit him where it hurts. His money, his reputation, his connections. The table fell silent, as everyone absorbed his words. Marlena looked around at the faces she loved most in the world. She saw fear, yes, but also strength, resolve, the spark of something greater than fear. She clasped her hands together. Then it's decided. We fight back. As a family. Darius sat in a high-rise office in downtown Boston, staring out over the city. The skyline glittered with lights, each one representing power, wealth, and ambition. It was everything he craved, everything he thought he deserved. Behind him, a man cleared his throat. "Mr. Cole," the man said, "we've got a problem. The Williams family isn't backing down." Darius didn't turn around. "Let them play their little game. They're nothing compared to me." The man shifted uncomfortably. "With respect, sir, they've already started digging. If they connect the dots, they could expose everything." Finally, Darius turned, his eyes cold. "Then make sure they don't. Pay off whoever needs paying. Silence whoever needs silencing. I don't care how you do it. Just make it go away." The man nodded and left quickly, clearly relieved to escape Darius's presence. Alone again, Darius poured himself a drink, the amber liquid catching the light. He took a slow sip, savoring the burn. "They think they can fight me," he muttered. "They have no idea what I'm capable of." Late one night, Ty sat alone in his car outside a warehouse on the edge of Montgomery. The building was old, its windows boarded up, its paint peeling. But the lot was filled with expensive cars, their engines cooling in the night air. Ty adjusted his binoculars, watching as men came and went. He recognized a few faces from his research, men tied to Darius's shell companies and Boston connections. Whatever was happening inside that warehouse, it wasn't legal. He grabbed his camera and began snapping photos. Each click was another piece of evidence, another nail in Darius's coffin. But then a door opened, and Ty froze. Darius himself stepped out, flanked by two men. He looked relaxed, even smug, as if the whole city belonged to him. Ty's hand tightened on the camera. Every instinct screamed at him to confront Darius, to drag him into the light right then and there. But he forced himself to stay still. Patience was key. One wrong move could blow everything. He watched as Darius lit a cigarette, the ember glowing in the darkness. The smoke curled upward, and for a brief moment, their eyes met across the lot. Ty's breath caught. The next morning, Marlena received a package on her porch. No return address, just a plain brown box sealed with tape. She carried it inside cautiously, her instincts prickling. Ty was already on his way over, so she waited until he arrived before opening it. When Ty cut through the tape, the contents made both of them freeze. Inside was a stack of photographs, grainy surveillance shots of the Williams family. Keisha walking into the hospital. The grandchildren playing in the yard. Marlena herself sitting on the porch with her sweet tea. Keisha gasped when she saw them. "Mama, he's watching us. He knows everything we do." Marlena's hands trembled slightly as she picked up one of the photos. "This is his way of trying to scare us," she said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her chest. "But we won't let him win." Ty leaned over the box and found a note tucked beneath the photographs. Written in bold black ink were the words, "Back off. Or next time, it won't just be pictures." Keisha clutched her children close, tears streaming down her face. "He's threatening us, Mama. What if he comes after the kids?" Marlena drew in a deep breath. "Then we fight harder. He wants us afraid. But fear won't protect this family. Action will." Meanwhile, in Boston, Darius was growing restless. The O'Malleys were pressuring him, his associates were questioning his strength, and the Williams family was refusing to break. He paced his penthouse apartment like a caged animal, anger boiling just beneath the surface. He poured himself another drink, his third that night, and stared out over the city's skyline. Power. That's what he wanted. That's what he deserved. And no one, not Marlena, not Ty, not Keisha, was going to stand in his way. His phone buzzed. A message from one of his men in Montgomery. They're digging deeper. Ty's got photos. Marlena's not backing down. Darius slammed the glass against the table, shattering it. Blood welled from his hand where the shards had cut him, but he didn't notice. His fury was stronger than the pain. "Then it's time," he growled. "No more games. If they want a war, I'll give them one." He began making calls, his voice low and dangerous. He summoned allies, bribed officials, and set plans in motion. By the time the sun rose over Boston, Darius Cole had declared war on the Williams family. Back in Montgomery, Marlena gathered her family in the living room. The air was thick with tension, but her voice was calm, steady, filled with conviction. "He's coming after us harder now," she said. "But this family has weathered storms before. We've buried loved ones. We've faced poverty. We've fought battles no one else knows about. And through it all, we've stood together. This will be no different." Ty placed the photos on the coffee table. "These are evidence now. I'm taking them to the department. We're building a case against him." Keisha's voice shook, but there was fire in her eyes. "He thinks he can scare me into silence. But I won't let him. I won't let my children grow up in fear." The Williams family braced themselves for what was coming. Every day felt heavier, the tension mounting like thunderclouds before a storm. Ty worked long nights, gathering evidence and building a case. Keisha poured her energy into her children, shielding them from the darkness as best she could. Marlena remained the pillar, her calm presence grounding them all. But Darius was relentless. He tightened his grip on his network, sending men to watch the family, to intimidate neighbors, to spread rumors that chipped away at their peace. Fear seeped into the community like poison, but Marlena refused to bow. One night, Sister Rosetta visited. She brought with her a flash drive, her hands trembling as she handed it to Marlena. "It's all here," she said. "The contracts, the recordings, the names. Enough to bury him." Ty plugged the drive into his laptop. File after file appeared on the screen, emails, wire transfers, audio clips of conversations Darius never intended anyone else to hear. The evidence was damning, more powerful than anything they had gathered so far. Keisha covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes wide. This could end him. Marlena's gaze was steady, her voice resolute. "Then that's exactly what we'll do." For the first time in months, hope flickered in the room. Not the fragile hope of survival, but the blazing hope of victory. It had been exactly 5 years since the superglue incident had changed everything, and Marlena Williams found herself sitting in her rocking chair on the front porch of her Oak Street home, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The same porch where she had once stood, sipping sweet tea while firefighters tried to separate two people stuck together. The same porch where she had watched her family's world crumble and then rebuild itself into something stronger than it had ever been. The evening breeze rustled through the magnolia trees, their leaves whispering secrets to the night. The wooden planks beneath Marlena's feet were warm and worn smooth by years of gatherings. The air smelled of blossoms, sweet and familiar. Marlena reflected on the journey, the pain, the betrayal, the battles fought and won. She thought of Keisha, who had rebuilt her life with strength she never knew she had. She thought of Ty, who had risked everything to protect his family. She thought of her grandchildren, who had grown up watching resilience in action. The Williams family had not just survived Darius Cole. They had thrived. They built a foundation that helped families across the country, turning their story of betrayal into a beacon of hope. Their tale had been told on national stages, written in magazines, even turned into a documentary that won awards. Marlena smiled softly as the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon. Their story wasn't just about catching a cheater. It was about the power of family, the strength of love, and the truth that no enemy, no matter how powerful, could destroy what was built on trust and unity. As the stars appeared above, Marlena whispered into the night, her voice strong and steady. "Every cheater thinks they're smarter than everyone else until they meet a family like ours. But the lesson isn't just about betrayal. It's about never giving up on the people you love. It's about standing tall, together, no matter how fierce the storm." The Williams family proved that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. They showed that strength isn't measured in wealth or lies, but in the unbreakable bonds of family. So the story closed where it began, on a quiet porch in Montgomery. But this time, there was no fear. Only peace. Only love. And the certainty that, whatever came next, the Williams family would face it together.